Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Council meeting for the 26th of February 2024. I would like to commence the meeting by calling upon Councillor Biggar to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and original...
In this Council chamber are Councillor Jim Park, Deputy Mayor Felicity Simfield, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Di Gillies, and on the opposite side we have Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Jane Addis, Councillor Susan Biggar and Councillor Victor Franco. I also acknowledge in attendance this evening is our Chief Financial Officer, Mr Philip Storer, sitting to my right, and our Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr Brian Lee, sitting to my left. There are also other officers in attendance tonight and they will be introduced as required. Now we'll go to apologies. Mr Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no apologies this evening.
Thank you. Adoption and confirmation of minutes held on the 18th of December 2023. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion to adopt the minutes. Councillor Simfield?
Happy to move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Gillies?
So seconded. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will now put that motion to the vote. I ask, please, if you all show your hands. Thank you. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest. Councillors and officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for matters of the agenda this evening? Mr Storer.
Yes, Madam Mayor, in relation to the two matters relating to the appointment of an independent advisor and the CEO Performance Committee, I'll declare an interest and leave the room.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under general business, I have a leave request coming up. I'll put in my leave request form in January. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Simfield.
Likewise, in relation to a leave of absence, I have a conflict of interest.
Thank you. And Councillor Park.
Me as well, thank you.
Thank you. Deputations and presentations, petitions and public submissions. Mr Wee, are there any deputations, petitions or public submissions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there were two petitions received as indicated on the screen. Following the distribution of the agenda, the first named petitioner for the first petition provided Council with a revised list of signatories, bringing the total number of signatories to 32 on that petition.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion to receive and note the petitions as appearing on the screen. Councillor Thompson?
I'm happy to move those motions as they're received. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Gillies?
So seconded. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put that motion to the vote. Sorry, is anyone opposed to the motion? No opposition, sorry, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All right, I pass that unanimously. Sorry, Councillor Franco, I didn't see your hand. Yep, all right, thank you. Informal meetings of councillors. Councillors, is there anyone prepared to move a motion in prepared to noting the informal meeting of councillors as appears on the screen? Councillor Addis.
Happy to move. They're actually in our minutes, but yep, happy to move. You can't see the screen behind you.
Thank you. And Councillor Galt.
So seconded. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Again, is there anyone opposed to that? I see no opposition. I will put the motion to the vote. A show of hands. Thank you. And I declare that carried unanimously. Public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 noon will be provided with a detailed response as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 p.m. will receive a verbal response if possible, but otherwise will be taken on notice and a more formal response provided in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 5 questions submitted by 3 people.
Thank you. And I will proceed with the questions. The first question is from Lisa Whitman, and the subject matter is management of gardens. Ms. Whitman, are you here this evening? Thank you. Thank you for your question. This question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, with relevant parts removed to allow the question to be read. The question: why is there decline in Burundara's heritage gardens when many other local government area parks and gardens, as well as the Melbourne Botanical Gardens, are able to be maintained to a high standard in horticulture despite dealing with the same sets of challenges? For a response to this question, I call upon Director of Places and Spaces, Mr. Daniel Freer, to respond.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. In recent years, with the increased practice of working from home, we've seen a significant increase in the number of people using parks across our city. Climate conditions also impact our gardens in all of those across Melbourne. It means that we need to adapt to altering weather conditions. We do this through plant, grass and tree choices and prudent management of our natural resources. Despite these factors, we believe we are continuing to maintain our gardens at a high standard. This is supported by benchmarking against other councils. Most recently, we undertook a community satisfaction survey in January of this year, which returned an overall satisfaction score of 98.9%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. And Ms. Whitman, you will receive a written response to your question in due course. The second question is from Mr. Ian Hundley. Mr. Hundley, are you here this evening? Thank you. I see you there in the gallery. Thank you for attending. Mr. Hundley's subject question is with regard to community consultation. Thank you for your question. This question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, with relevant parts removed to allow the question to be read. The question is, please advise whether Burundara Council will be receiving public submissions at Council's annual budget for the 2024-25 annual budget and for subsequent budgets. And I call upon our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Amy Muntati, to provide a response. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, Council is yet to turn its mind to the budget for the 24-25 year or subsequent years, and will make a formal decision regarding consultation and submissions at the appropriate point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hundley, you will receive a written response to your question in due course. The next question is also from Mr. Ian Hundley. Subject is FOI application, signalised crossing on Borwood Road, Borwood North. This question has been disallowed under Rule 55.2 of the Governance Rules because it was not first asked in writing to a councillor or a member of council staff more than 10 working days before this meeting, and it does not relate to a subject matter on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Mr. Hundley, you will receive a written response to your question in due course. Thank you. Now, the next question is from Lee Norton. Mr. Norton, you're here? Yes, I can see you in the gallery. Thank you for coming. Subject is election period policy. The question is, can Council please advise, and sorry, I should say this question is allowed. Can Council please advise as to whether the election period policy, section 3.9, and the definition of the advertising of sign in the policy, together with the prohibitive use of candidates and supporters and/or third-party campaigners or place cards and A-frames placed on council-controlled land and council roads and/or wearing of campaign-related clothing and badges by candidates and supporters and/or third-party campaigners in those locations. I call upon Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr. Brian Wee, to respond to your question. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. This relates to an item that appears later in the agenda. There is indeed some ambiguity about the choice of wording in the policy. Council officers are seeking advice about that wording and its effect, and will suggest deferring the item to get clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. And Mr. Norton, as you heard, that question will be subject to an agenda item later this evening, and a response will be sent to you in due course. Now, I believe that is the end. Oh, sorry, there is a second part here to Mr. Norton's question. The question being, can Council please advise how it will interpret the words election campaign in relation to 3.9 of the draft election policy or election period policy? Again, I call upon Mr. Wee to provide a response.
Again, through you, Madam Mayor, the words election campaign will be given its ordinary meaning. For example, in the context of the upcoming 2024 local government elections, it would include any candidate's campaign to be elected to council in this election.
Thank you. And again, there will be a written response in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is one notice of motion as appearing in your business papers and on the screen.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm in search of a mover for this motion, and please note that under Rule 26.1 of the Governance Rules, the councillor moving the motion can only state the motion and cannot speak to it until debate. Do I have a mover of the motion?
Yes, Chair. Chair, I'd like to move a procedural motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Can I ask what the procedural motion is?
Yes, it's to lay this item on the table, procedural motion number 4, and for it to be discussed at an alternate time.
Yeah, Councillor Sinfield, if you don't mind, I will seek governance advice.
Well, I've got a point of order. You called for movers of the motion. I put on my light to move that motion. You've bypassed me and gone to Councillor Sinfield.
Councillor Franco, I haven't bypassed you. Councillor Sinfield's light was on first, and I'm just following the order of the councillors that have first put the light
but
on.
you called for a mover of the motion, and I've put my light on to move that motion.
I will seek advice of the CEO. Thank you.
Perhaps I can help. With a notice of motion, under the governance rules, any councillor can in fact move that notice of motion irrespective of the two councillors whose signatures appear on the notice of motion itself. The system the Mayor is relying upon tells her whose light has gone on in which order, and Councillor Sinfield's light went on first. There is nothing to stop Councillor Sinfield from moving the motion. My advice, subject to that of the Manager of Governance, is that at this point in time, there is no motion before Council until it is actually moved and seconded, in which case there is nothing to lay on the table until it's been moved and seconded. If Mr. Wee has a different opinion, I'd be happy for him to express it, but that's my understanding.
Thank you, Mr.
So there is no motion to lay on the table at this point in time because nothing has been moved or seconded.
So again, I ask if there is a mover for the motion that's on the screen behind us. And Councillor Franco.
Yes, I move the motion. I'll read it out. That Council resolve to act on the petition tabled at Council on 27 November 2023 and undertake community consultation on whether Boroondara Council should conduct a citizenship ceremony on a day other than 26 January in 2025 and beyond in accordance with the Australian Citizenship Ceremonies Code. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Now, I call for a seconder, but bear with me because the sequence of lights being put on. Councillor Simfield, your light was second? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's my understanding of the governance rules that the question can be laid on the table before it is moved. However, now that it has been moved, I don't believe it needs a seconder, so therefore I will once again state my procedural motion, and that is to lay the item on the table.
Thank you. Again, I will seek governance advice. Bear with me, please.
If it's determined you do need a seconder, that is what my light is on for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar.
Just a procedural question, Mayor. Under all our conventional procedures, a motion isn't valid and isn't active until it's seconded. So it would be unusual, and it would be worthy of an explanation, how we could have a motion that's valid with only the mover and not a seconder. Thank you.
Again, with your patience, Mr. Wee is just checking governance protocol. Thank you.
Perhaps the mover might like to familiarise himself with section 43 of the governance rules, which says that unless otherwise prohibited, a procedural motion may be moved at any time. However, the procedural motion will need a seconder, Chair, to assist you.
Thank you, Councillor Simfield. Councillors, it's governance understanding that the question cannot be laid on the table until after the motion and or amendments has been moved and seconded. Councillor Biggar, you foreshadowed you wanted to second the motion.
I do indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Simfield, your light is on.
Let me have a third attempt. Chair, I'd like to move a procedural motion to lay this agenda item on the table.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Addis. Yeah. Because it is a procedural motion to lay on the table, there is no discussion or debate. Councillors, I seek...
Point of order, I'd like to check that, Mayor. There's nothing that I can see in our governance rules that says there is no debate in relation to a procedural motion in respect of this. The procedural motion is not number 4 laying on the table, I believe.
It is number 4, and if the procedural motion is put, then there is no opportunity for debate. So, councillors, I seek your support of supporting this motion.
Normally, another point of order, Mayor, normally you would ask if there are councillors opposed to the motion, and...
Point of order cited needs to be mentioned if you're raising a point of order, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Simfield. Because the motion's been asked to be laid on the table, it's a procedural motion. So I seek a show of hands in support for this motion. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm going to call a division. I can do that now or later, but for purpose of proceeding, I call a division.
You can do so. Yes, yeah. So, sorry, I have asked for those in favour and I have seen a show of hands. I ask for those opposed to the procedural motion. Okay, there are 5 opposed and 6 in support. Councillor Franco?
And I call a division in case that, to make it absolutely and abundantly clear.
Look,
Thank
I
you.
understand.
Chair, you ought to call the motion as as carried.
Yes, yes, that's right. The motion has been carried. Thank you, Councillor Park. Now, to proceed with the division, for those that have supported the motion, can you please raise your hand? And I call Councillor Park, Councillor Simfield, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Watson and Councillor Addis. Those opposed? Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Galt, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Biggar and Councillor Franco. So that motion has been carried.
Excuse me, just a point of order. I just wonder if the chair might just explain for members in the gallery exactly what's just happened, because it could be slightly confusing.
Yes, thank
I
you very
believe.
much. I'll call on our Manager of Governance and Legal to provide that explanation. Thank you. Mr Wee.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the notice of motion was moved and seconded, and Councillor Sinfield, moved a procedural motion to lay the matter on the table. That is, the matter will be laid, the question will be discussed at a further time. The councillors are required to vote on that, and council voted in favour of that procedural motion.
Madam Mayor, I think I need to clarify something which was just said. Laying a matter on the table means no decision has been made other than to put it on the table. That's the first point. The second is to make the observation that Mr Wee indicated the matter will come back for discussion at a later time. It may not come back for a discussion at a later time. That will depend upon a couple of different factors. At this stage, it simply lays on the table until those choices are made, which they, in fact, may never be.
Thank you, Mr Storer. And if I may add a comment, all I was going to say is that in this situation, laying on the table is not anything other than council's decision to not support the motion and ideally to seek more information potentially at a later date. So it's not in support or opposition of the motion as such, it's just that there is no support from council to proceed with this motion at this stage. Thank you. We will now move on to the next item. We'll move into the presentation of officer reports. Now, councillors, with such a large agenda this evening, there may be an opportunity to list some of the items en bloc, and I will put forward to you a suggestion of items that can be considered to go en bloc. Item 7.1, biannual report from the Audit and Risk Committee. Item 7.2, contract of record storage and imaging services. Item 7.4, award of contract 2023-119 biodiversity sites maintenance contract panel. Item 7.5, the December 2023 quarterly performance report. Item 7.8, instrument of appointment and authorisation, Environment Protection Act. Item 7.9, organised sports seasonal allocation policy. And item 7.11, terms and reference for the CEO Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion to see if there is anyone prepared to move those agenda items en bloc as per officer recommendation. Councillor Park.
Chair, I'm happy to move the motion, save for the inclusion of item 7.11.
Yes.
And if there's any councillors who are seeking anything else to come out, then I'm happy to accommodate that in the motion.
Thank you. Now, the next slide that was on was Councillor Addis.
Yes, I'm happy to second that. I would have been happy either way.
Right. Okay. So,
Madam Chair, I have an item that
Yes.
I'd like removed.
thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Park, I just wanted to confirm, so you're seeking 7.11 to retain?
It's correct as it says, subject
Right.
to what Councillor Franco is seeking.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councillor Franco,
Item 7.4, thank you.
which is the award of the biodiversity sites maintenance contract. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. So that will stay in also for discussion. Councillors, Councillor Parker, you happy to?
Yes, so I move that motion as now displayed.
Right, thank you. So to just confirm, we have 7.1, 7.2, 7.5, 7.8 and 7.9 to be moved en bloc. Councillor Park, you have supported that motion. And to second, Councillor Addis?
I'm happy to second.
All right,
Thank you, Chair.
thank you. Is there anyone in opposition to that? I see no lights on, no hands up. I will put that motion to the vote. Councillors, please show of hands. Thank you. That is supported unanimously. Declare that carried. So we will move to, sorry. We're just waiting for the CEO to return. Welcome back. Okay. All right, so we will move to 7.3. And I call Michelle Foster, the Acting Manager of Livable Communities. We have our Director, Kate McCaggy, and Michelle sitting here, and Lucinda to join if need be. Thank you. So, Ms. Foster, would you like to begin with your presentation?
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Tonight we present to you the Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan for endorsement. This 6-year strategy is the culmination of 3 rounds of community and stakeholder consultation, and we know that local economy is of growing importance to our community and was ranked 3rd highest priority in the Community Plan 2131. This strategy is the key document to deliver on this priority theme. The 3-year action plan is key to delivering positive outcomes across our 53 shopping strips of centres, and we know that thriving shopping precincts are important to our community. The 24 actions within the plan are designed to deliver what the community has told us they want, and these actions complement the 14 core economic development programs as listed in the report. Together, the strategy, the action plan, and the core business activity will support our business community to thrive in a challenging retail landscape. We need to support our shopping centres and high streets in the wake of COVID-19 with associated changes in retail patterns and a downturn in economic conditions. To continue to do this, additional resourcing is requested so Council can meet community expectations and support local businesses to grow and thrive. To ensure the delivery of the economic development programs and actions, officers recommend the resolution as printed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Gillies, you were first, followed by Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Chair. No question, but I'm prepared to move a motion when the time is right.
All right, thank you. Councillor Stavrou, is your light on for a question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one question for the officers. Could you outline a little bit how the monitoring and evaluation works and how has it sort of been worked how it has worked in the past?
Can I just clarify monitoring and evaluation of?
Well, there's an economic plan, which is a fantastic plan, by the way. It's very comprehensive. But how do we know that it works? Because we're not actually doing the doing. We're putting a structure in place and to ensure that the activity can grow and really for our municipality to continue to grow.
So it's a great question. We don't actually have a strategy in place at the moment, and so one of the purposes of having a strategy is to sort of put a proper evaluation plan in place in terms of how we're going to evaluate the success of the plan. So some of the key things that we'll be looking at will be things like occupancy rates within local shopping centres, foot traffic, visitation rates, etc. So they're some of the things in terms of that economic sort of indicators that we'll be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Does that satisfy your question? Thank you. I can see no other lights on, so Councillor Gillies, you move the motion.
Thank you, Chair. It's the officer's recommendation on the screen.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Stavrou.
A second.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone in opposition? No? Councillor Gillies, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, this is a very well worked through 6-year strategy implemented through 2 3-year plans that will help keep relevance and responsiveness in place. And thank you, Councillor Stavrou, for your question about key indicators, because that's an important part of putting this in place. We saw the importance of local economic development rise within the BCP Refresh consultation, and I think that reinforces the message that we need to sustain the good work being done. I know that the traders of the Auburn traders and the Camberwell Traders Associations have been very happy with the activities, supports and initiatives being delivered in line with the strategy. And I believe that it's important that we maintain resourcing the roles of these core programs. These strategies like this help equip us with a proved strategic approach to work with state and federal policies while maintaining our focus on the city of Boroondara. So on that note, I put the motion to my colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Now, I know this is unopposed, but Councillor Stavrou, your light is on. As seconded, did you wish to speak? No? Okay. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, officers. Well done. We'll now move to item 7.4, the Biodiversity Sites Maintenance Contract Panel. And I call upon our Director, Daniel Freer, to speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to consider the award of contract 2023/119 for a panel of contractors to conduct maintenance services in our biodiversity areas. This will replace an existing contract and will not only allow us to continue to maintain these valuable areas, but expand them by approximately 1 hectare each year, in line with our commitments in the urban biodiversity strategy. The contract is for an initial period of 3 years with a possible extension of 2 years. As a schedule of rates contract, no minimum quantity of work for the 3 contractors is guaranteed. We received 14 submissions for these works, most of which are of a high quality. So after a thorough evaluation process supported by a probity advisor, the recommendation is to award to 3 contractors as shown on the screen, and I commend the resolution to you.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions in relation to the report, and I welcome the comments from the Director, which were helpful. And in the Director's comments, he noted that Council has a very strong commitment to this program and including the expansion of the biodiversity sites. However, in the background of page 1, paragraph 3, it reads, and this is what I'm seeking an explanation on, I quote, "It is important to note that council does not guarantee either a minimum quantity of work in relation to any of the contract components." So it reads a little bit oddly as if either a minimum or a maximum. Later on in the report, it refers to not guaranteeing a minimum. However, I'm curious as to why we do that, particularly given the importance of these sites and council's commitment to expansion of the sites by a hectare. So, be helpful. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The objective overall is to increase, and by 2030, the expansion we're aiming for is 61 hectares. The approach taken here is to provide for 3 contractors to balance the work across the city, rather than trying to commit to a single contractor to undertake the maintenance activities across the city alone, where there might be particular challenges about weather events, changes in conditions in a local area. We may not, with a single contractor, be adequately resourced to respond to those challenges. By spreading it to 3 contractors, we've found that to be a more efficient way to maintain sites across the city.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the explanation. I'm very supportive of what you've proposed and the approach by having multiplicity of contractors that we can draw upon. I'm happy, Mayor, to flag a motion should the opportunity arise.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. I do not see any other lights on for questions. So, Councillor Franco, would you like to move the motion?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation as my motion.
Right. Thank you. And for a seconder, I see Councillor Biggar. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. I will first of all ask if there's anyone in opposition. I do not see any lights on. Councillors, we'll put that motion to the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Franco, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, I'll just make the point very briefly that I think it's a good approach having a multiplicity of contractors rather than relying on one, particularly given the history of issues with our parks and gardens, biodiversity site maintenance in the years that I've been on council. So I applaud the approach taken here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. And again, as it's unopposed, Councillor Biggar, your light's not on. Okay, I will put the motion. All those in support? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item we are going to is item 7.6, adoption of election period policy. And Mr. Wee will speak to this motion. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The Local Government Act requires, amongst other things, amongst other policies, an election period policy. That's required under Section 69 of the Local Government Act. With an impending election in October 2024, officers reviewed the election period policy and noted that there were some minor changes required to the existing policy, most notably changes of the date to reflect the 2024 election as opposed to a 2020 election, changes to some nomenclature, for example, referring to public consultation previously, we now refer to community engagement under the Act, and changes to some titles in the document. Since the agenda in this report has been published, a number of questions have been raised about the content, noting that the content remains, those particular questions, the content remains the same from the previous policy, and that policy is still in effect in the document. In the circumstances, and together with a query about whether the policy itself needs to be subject to consultation, officers now recommend that the matter be deferred for queries and consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. Now, I notice, Councillor Franco, your light is on. Is that for a question?
I was going to move an alternative recommendation, but this is quite unusual to see this approach being put up at the last second. So I have a couple of questions then. I'll modify it to my moving a motion to asking a series of questions.
Yes, Councillor Franco.
So why are we proposing to defer a policy that we've previously adopted, and that why are you putting this recommendation up at this point?
Mr. Wee.
And I prefaced it by saying as well that I had flagged in advance that I would be moving a motion to put the matter out for public consultation. So now we're getting, let's defer instead of publicly consult.
Dealing with your matters in reverse order, Councillor Franco, there's no reason why consultation now, why a motion for public consultation is not appropriate at this point. It's a matter for councillors indeed in the resolution. In terms of the issues that were raised, these issues were raised by councillors and indeed through a question that was raised from the public. And it raised matters where officers identified that there was an ambiguity in the language. Those questions, for example, the public question arose today. Those questions arose only recently, and it is in interpreting those, in considering those questions, officers are looking to seek advice about it.
An additional point that I'd like to raise is as a question, and I ask, it's clear, is it not, that Section 69 of the Local Government Act clearly states that a council must include an election period policy in its governance rules?
I believe you've read from the Act, so if you've read from the Act, then that's the response.
And it's clear that amending the governance rules requires public consultation, is that correct?
Amending the governance rules requires public consultation. Officers had a view that a election period policy, much like, for example, the transparency policy and other policies, may not require public consultation. Section 69, which deals with the election period policy, does not refer to public consultation being required.
In relation to this matter, you've proposed deferral, but you've not proposed a time frame, yet we have an election period approaching and some interpretations of the Act. I put it that the most obvious interpretation of the Act requires public consultation. Is there a time frame in relation to your newly revised officer's recommendation in relation to a deferral?
If it was a matter for advice, then the time frame could be reasonably contracted together with potential amendments arising from the questions. If there is public consultation, then that time frame may be longer to allow the public consultation.
Okay, well, I'll flag an alternate motion.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Mr. Storer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to suggest that the consultation, which I think we would agree needs to be undertaken, would best be undertaken on the basis that it is a proposition which this council in fact agrees to. So going out to the community to consult on something which the council itself has not yet been prepared to say is what it represents, what it's standing by, may not be all that beneficial. So I'd suggest if you were contemplating moving as part of your proposal that there be consultation on this draft, it would be best to wait until the council has actually said, yes, this is a position we think fairly represents what we stand for, and to then consult on that.
Thank you for that clarification. What I was going to suggest was moving that the matter be deferred and returned to the next council meeting for public consultation with a draft for public consultation. So just adding those words to that current motion.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. We'll continue with questions first. So, Councillor Sinfield.
I was going to move the officer's recommendation, but might move an amendment at the appropriate time. I don't have a question.
All right, thank you. Councillor Thompson? Oh, your light just went off.
Yeah, I found the answer to my question.
All right, thank you. Councillor Park?
Does the advice that's proposed to be sought, does it extend beyond consultation? In other words, are there other matters? Okay.
Mr Wee, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Park, there are other matters which officers would like to look at, including the definition of advertising sign and clause 3.9 about what is and is not allowed during an election period as part of an election campaign.
So the next council meeting is
Date?
25th of March.
March
25th of March, I think.
20,
I think it's the 25th.
25th?
I'm just wondering if that's going to be realistically enough time, or whether it ought to be the council meeting in May, in the event that Councillor Franco is to move a motion putting a timeline on it.
That's what my adjournment.
Mr Storer?
Yes, I would really like to maintain the commitment to the next meeting and to give our lawyers some encouragement to respond quickly, so that, because I'm conscious that the consultation will take some time, the feedback analysis and your consideration of it will take some time, and we need to be well and truly ahead of this before you get to the election, so all of those of you who are interested in the election know exactly where you stand. So I'm quite comfortable with the proposition that it come back to the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr Storer. Councillor Simfield, sorry, your light was on but it's gone off again. Councillor Franco, your light is on, but also Councillor Thompson and Councillor Biggar has just come on. So Councillor Franco, are you happy to take questions first? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor, in response to a question to the CEO, can this, if the intent is to put it out for consultation, can it be brought to a services committee for that purpose before being adopted later on at council?
The governance rules will need to be adopted by council. That's the first thing.
Yep.
So it will end up back at council in any event.
But can
If you wanted to hear submissions in relation to it, then you could make an exception at a council meeting and hear them at the council meeting, rather than have two separate meetings where you are considering the same material.
No, I'm just thinking with regards to expediting, if that's the will of council, to take it out to consultation and to address the things that Mr Wee's spoken about. Can it come to a services meeting to then put it out for consultation before it's later adopted at council?
I think it could come to a services for that purpose. I'm not sure that will necessarily expedite it, but it can certainly come to services just for that purpose.
Yep.
But I also just make the observation that what you have in front of you is exactly the same as the previous council's adopted policy. So the only thing that's changed here is the dates. I was in conversation with a councillor earlier today about this, and I've subsequently discovered that the only changes made from the prior policy are the dates. So this is quite an interesting experience in the sense that the content has been looked at through a different lens, which is fine. This is a group of people now looking at it. But I did want to make the point that what you have in front of you is there because it was the previous adopted policy.
Madam Mayor, if I can just follow up, there are a few little sections that change the wording from may to will and will to must and shall and those sorts of things, which does change the basis of the outcome that candidates or anyone can use. So I think it goes a little bit beyond, Mr CEO, what you've just expressed in some areas.
Yes. For context, what's really important about this particular policy is that it is very clear as to what will and will not be permissible. because I can tell you from experience that this ends up landing at the feet of staff with two parties arguing about how it's meant to be interpreted from different perspectives, and it's not helpful.
Thank you, Mr Storer. Councillor Thompson, that satisfies your question? Thank you. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, so can I just clarify a couple of things? One is then when was this policy agreed? It was prior to the 2020 election, is that correct?
That's correct.
So obviously one thing that's changed is that it's a different council. And also, I presume then if it was only done at that stage, it's that election was somewhat different in terms of not actually really testing some of these elements, because there really was very little external involvement, person to person. For instance, when I look at the question under advertising, son, I'm just wondering, you know, that when we talk about a person or another thing and how that person, we presumably did not have that addressed, whether someone could wear a T-shirt into a library, for instance, that says Susan Biggar for council or something. Yeah, yeah. So I can see why. Then the only other thing was just to ask whether that is that the proposal motion we're debating, or could we have the motion that is proposed up on the screen?
Councillor Franco proposed an amendment to the motion.
Yes, I'm proposing I move that the matter be deferred to the next meeting of council and for purpose of, I'll answer that in a second, Councillor Thompson. I've got another solution to your query. Next meeting of council for the purpose of putting the draft out to public consultation and for inclusion in the governance rules. I would like to I know Councillor Thompson has said he would like the Services Committee, and the reason I'm proposing it this way is to suggest and ask a question of the CEO or the governance manager. If we say for the next meeting of council, that could be the next ordinary meeting, or it could be an earlier extraordinary meeting that could be timed with the Services Committee or something else, which would avoid putting it to committee and having a debate there, and rather putting it out for public consultation. That would be my logic, but if you're okay with that, or if you'd prefer, I'm very conscious of the time and embedding this
I wouldn't think there'd be much debate on putting something out for community consultation.
Okay, or what about the next meeting of council or Services Committee?
It depends on how quick the CEO and the team can review and get the appropriate responses.
Can I suggest that the best way of dealing with this is to talk about the next available meeting of council? We can just make a choice based on the information being available to us then.
Thank you. I'm happy with that. So the next available meeting of council for the purpose of putting a draft out for public consultation and inclusion in the governance rules.
Councillor Franco, is that your motion on the screen now?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Now, I'm just sorry, I'm looking, we have a series of lights on. We'll go to a seconder and then we'll determine if there's any opposition.
If council has a question, they can ask at any time.
Okay, so we can actually go to questions before this is second. So I think we should do that first because there's a lot of lights on. Councillor Park, you're next.
I was proposing to second. I don't have a question, but I did want to just slightly amend the motion. I think when we put it out to, well, maybe I have got a question. When we put it out to public consultation, are we said to adopt it for that purpose? What are we doing?
I think we put it out for public consultation and it would need to come back to council to be adopted as a policy.
it's just, it says putting the draft policy, we don't yet have it. So, yeah, probably the word a rather than the. It's just, otherwise it might be interpreted as meaning we're putting the policy that's before us tonight up, which isn't the intention. And I think the word "and" after consultation could come out.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor
So
Franco.
I'm happy to second that if.
Sorry, could you speak a bit louder, Councillor Franco?
I agree with all of Councillor Park's suggested amendments to the motion, and the word putting may more elegantly be replaced with the word adopting, but I don't mind either way.
Can I just suggest that if you talk about adopting, then there's a question as to the role council needs to play in adopting.
Although it is a draft, isn't it?
So, yes, so
Probably doesn't matter, but.
I don't know that it makes a huge amount of difference, and if you wanted to split hairs, you might even talk about exhibiting rather than putting, but that's a matter for you.
Exhibiting would be better, thank you.
Are you happy to second that, Councillor Park? Thank you. Now, before we go to the vote on this, I just want to finish with the questions. Councillor Sinfield, then Councillor Addis.
On that latest change, I think I might withdraw what was going to be a suggestion of a wording change, but I think I'm sufficiently happy with that.
Thank you, except perhaps exhibiting may need a typo correction. Councillor Addis.
I just wanted to check that obviously presupposes that the decision will be to put it out for public consultation. Are we in a position where we can confidently say that that is a requirement? Because that's not quite what I heard. But as long as it is a condition, then yes, that's fine. As long as it's a requirement, I'm sorry.
Mr. Wee, thank you.
I think it's a matter where minds may differ, and officers have put the view in the report. However, a number of councillors tonight have potentially put a different view, but it is a decision for council ultimately.
So then I wonder if it shouldn't just be that the matter be deferred.
That's why it'll be a matter for debate. So you're quite right. You've identified a difference of opinion.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Stavrou.
I think Councillor Addis pretty much expressed exactly what I thought: simplify the matters and stop it after the development of council, because we've established that it has to be included in the governance rules, so that doesn't add any more information, and the view is that it has to go out for public opinion anyway, so stop there and simplify.
Mr. Storer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to express a different view to that expressed by Mr. Wee. And it is to say that the policy is actually in the governance rules. And my view is that if it is in the governance rules, then it is covered by the obligations in relation to the governance rules, which require that they be subject to consultation where they are going to be adopted or amended. And whilst there may well be a legal argument made to suggest to the contrary, and Mr. Wee certainly has skill in this regard, I don't know that it's worth taking the risk that the governance rules could be subject to challenge. So I'd rather take a conservative approach and put them out for consultation anyway. And it's clearly still up to you, but I can see how the argument can be made, and I'm just not sure that it's worth putting the governance rules at risk as a consequence. So that would be my view.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Now, Councillor Sinfield, your light's on.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I'm inclined to move an amendment to that motion, and that is to bring it back to the officer's recommendation, so that any advice that the CEO or the Manager of Governance and Legal require to brief us appropriately can in fact be provided. I think the intent is well understood by officers, and I don't think there would be anything lost by bringing that back to simply deferring the item.
Thank you, Councillor Simfield. I just wanted to go, sorry, Councillor Stavrou. You were happy to just second it, okay. All right.
Mayor, I'd just like to make a clarification on the notice of motion that's been moved and by me and seconded by Councillor Park, in just relation to the wording that's a little bit clunky before and I'd just like to run that past. We've got, for the purpose of exhibiting a draft election period policy out to public consultation for inclusion in the governance rules, it should be for the purpose of publicly exhibiting a draft election policy for inclusion in the governance rules. Sorry, just we didn't. That's better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor.
That's the motion that's been moved and seconded.
All right. Thank you.
Amendment.
We have got a seconder, Councillor Park, yes.
So is the amended motion opposed?
All right, so with the motion on the screen at the moment, I seek councillors to advise, is anyone opposed to this motion? To the motion that's on the screen? The amended motion, yeah. So, sorry, is the... Yeah, sorry. Is anyone opposed to the motion that's on the screen?
We've got an amendment now, so we need to move the amendment. So we've got an amendment.
Sorry.
We've got a seconder.
Right. Okay. So we have an amendment motion, which is just that the matter be deferred. Councillors, is there a seconder to that motion?
Just as a procedure, I don't think we can just delete the intent of the motion completely and have that as an amendment to the motion. It's beyond an amendment. It's effectively removing the motion.
I don't believe it changes the substantive intent.
There will be a paper with another recommendation, Madam Mayor, and the recommendation we can deal with at the time.
It's not directly opposite to the motion.
Right, so the amendment is not directly opposite to the motion, to the intent of the motion. So for governance purposes, this satisfies an amendment. Councillor Stavrou, you indicated you wanted to second.
Yes.
Yeah, the motion that's put before. Is anyone in opposition to the motion?
The amendment.
The amendment motion? Yes, yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm actually opposed to it as well. So the amendment motion is defeated.
Okay, I'll call a division, just so we're clear.
Close the debate now.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, the amendment motion must now go to debate. So before we go any further, Councillor Simfield, would you like to speak to your motion?
I don't think there is much point, Chair. It appears lost, so I will expedite things and leave it there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Councillors, we will now go to the vote on the amended motion.
We have debate.
I think we just put it to the vote. It's clearly defeated.
Are we voting on the original substantive motion or the amendment?
The motion on the screen at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so those in support of the motion on the screen? And those opposed to the motion on the screen? So the motion is lost. So Councillor Franco.
So we return to the original motion?
Yes, I was going to say, Councillor Franco, would you like to return to your...
Thank you. Firstly, I think it's very important that the election period policy be included in it. Councillor Park is the second. Yeah. It's very important that we include the election period policy in our governance rules and that we undertake public consultation in respect of the policy. This will ensure we adhere to the spirit and the intent of the Local Government Act. And I note that our Chief Executive Officer has also expressed a similar view. And it would be transparent and consultative in respect of critical governance documents such as this policy, which is very important. And to adopt, so I think it's important we set aside, we make it absolutely clear, in contrast to the governance report that we had received that had recommended no public consultation and had recommended attaching it to the governance rules rather than including it in the governance rules. It's very clear that Section 69(1) of the Local Government Act states that the election period policy must be included in the governance rules. It does not say attached to the governance rules. And it's very clear that the Local Government Act requires public consultation in respect of the governance rules. And this is for good, sound governance reasons. And I finally note that this is common practice among other councils who are doing this. I mean, the City of Melbourne has included its election policy in its governance rules. Yarra, Stonington, City of Kingston's currently out to consultation for inclusion in its governance rules. So it would give everybody has an interest in the election, whether as a candidate involved in some way, to have a say and provide commentary in relation to this critical policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Park, as seconded, you wish to speak now, or?
I'll speak now.
You're right.
Look, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether the Act imposes the obligation for public consultation or not. My view is it does, but regardless, what we should be doing is not aiming for the minimum requirements, but actually aiming to be better than that and to actually say, well, we can benefit from the fairly keen public interest that there'll be in this policy by getting the gift of feedback. We've got ample time. There's no reason we shouldn't.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillors, is there anyone in opposition? Does anyone want to speak to this motion? No opposition. I will then put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move to agenda item 7.7, proposed removal of reserve status and sale of drainage reserve adjoining Illawarra Road, Kooyonkoot, and Reserve Road in Hawthorn. And we have Mr. Hutchinson and Ms. Amy Montague. Ms. Montague, are you speaking? Mr. Hutchinson, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Councillors, before you is a report to consider commencement of the statutory procedures to remove the reserve status and sell the drainage reserve adjoining 68 to 110 Illawarra Road, 73 to 107 Kooyonkoot Road, and 9A to 11 Reserve Road, Hawthorn. The report details the background to the proposal. The location of the reserve is shown in attachment 1 of your papers. In summary, the reserve is in the name of the original subdivider. It is considered by officers to be no longer required for the purposes for which it was reserved and is of little value to council. It has been enclosed within many of the adjoining properties in Illawarra Road for in excess of 15 years. There is a council drain and Yarra Valley water asset located within the reserve. Council's current policy provides that council will take title to all unsold, discontinued sections of this reserve. A small section of the reserve will be set aside as road, consistent with its current use. The owners of 78, 82, 90 and 110 Illawarra Road and 81 and 83 Kooyonkoot Road, Hawthorn have conditionally offered to purchase the land from the reserve. The adjoining property owners have been consulted on the proposal and no objections have been received. Should council resolve to commence the statutory procedures, a public notice will be placed on council's webpage. A notification in writing will be made directly to all abutting owners, informing them of the opportunity to provide feedback. If any submissions are received, a further report will be presented to a future meeting of the Services Delegated Committee to enable the consideration of any submissions and for a decision on whether or not to sell the land. If no submissions are received, Council will undertake the necessary procedural steps to complete the formal process for the sale of the land. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hutchinson. Councillor, are there any questions? Councillor Biggar.
Yes, thank you for that. So can I just clarify, well, for my sake and possibly for other councillors, you did note in the report that this process had begun to discontinue and sell the drainage reserve. It began in 2019, and so you made a point in the report that as a result of that happening before we changed our policy in August 2022, this sale consideration is being progressed under the terms of the previous policy. Can you just clarify for us then what the difference is, so that we're very clear on that, what the difference is for this particular matter?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. There's probably two main differences. One difference is the cost of somebody who, I guess, already encloses the land in their property, that adverse possession type of approach. That's changed from $9,000 in the old policy to now it's $11,000. And the other one being the recovery of costs from that group of potential purchasers. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just follow on? So
Certainly.
then, can I just clarify then, on page 370 of 385, it does list for those first 4 Illawarra properties, it does list it as $11,000 rather than $9,000. Wouldn't it be $9,000 then? Or am I misunderstanding that?
Yes, it appears to be correct. That should be $9,000.
Okay, and the other two are correct? The other figures, would they be, those are appropriate? Okay,
Those are the current market values, correct?
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. Sorry, I just want to assume there would be a correction on the paper. Thank you. And Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. My question through you to officers in relation to part 3 of the officer recommendation on the screen, and I wonder why we would include and accept verbal submissions as opposed to just written submissions on the proposal.
Mr Hutchinson.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, that allows for submitters who may wish to come and speak to council if it returns to a Services Delegated Committee.
Councillor Sinfield, does that satisfy your question?
In part, thank you, Mayor, but I think as far as formal submissions are concerned, I understand that a verbal submission sitting at the end of the horseshoe table may be construed that way, but as far as responding to the invitation to treat and that transaction, I think only written submissions should be received.
Sorry, and through you, Madam Mayor. We can change that if you wish. However, if someone did wish to come and speak to that proposal at the Services Delegated Committee, they would be able to do that without prior submitting a formal written submission.
Thank you. So, Councillor Biggar.
Yes, so would we normally, so by taking out, were we to take out verbal submissions out of that point 3, or the word "and verbal," you're saying that would still, a person would still, we're not going to prevent someone coming to services meeting and submitting. That's absolutely fine. And so you're comfortable with that. If we were to make that alteration, I would be.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I'm happy to, when the time is right, propose that we cut out those 2 words in number 3, and.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. I'll just check. There doesn't appear to be any more questions. So, councillors, I'm in search of a motion. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, once those words are taken out, and with the agreement that the sums further down will be amended from 11,000 to 9,000, I'm happy to, with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And that administrative change, I believe we have an assurance that will be done. Councillors, I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Addis?
Ask a question.
Certainly.
Sorry, but I reckon we should take out written and just put invite submissions, or because otherwise look, it doesn't absolutely matter, but it could be implied then that only written submissions will be accepted. And we've clearly stated that verbal is okay.
As the mover, I'm certainly happy to take out written. I think it's probably clearer, since effectively we're accepting either, isn't it?
I'll just seek advice of Chief Financial Officer.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar is the mover of the motion. Councillor, sorry, we don't have a seconder. We do have a seconder, Councillor Addis, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Biggar, are you happy with the amendment to that motion? Before we move the motion, is there anyone in opposition to the motion before us? I see no lights on, no hands up, no opposition. Councillor Biggar, would you like to speak to your motion?
Only to thank the officers for the work on this. I know that it has been going on for some years, and appreciate that that does take time and effort, and particularly when they're dealing with 2 different policies. So appreciate the complexity of that, and largely, otherwise this is procedural. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I see there is no opposition. Councillor Addis, would you like to speak as seconder? All right, I will put the motion. All those in favour? It is supported unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, officers. Yes. So we'll move to 7.9, organised sport seasonal allocation policy. Sorry, we're just checking. It's all right. It's all right. We thought it was not included, but just double checking. So the next item is 7.10, North East Link, Young Creek Reserve Master Plan. So we'll call upon Claire Davey and Director of Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer. Thank you. When you're ready, Ms Davies, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, thank you for your time tonight. So the report tonight shares the outcomes of the September and October 2023 community engagement and consultation about the North East Link program authored Coonung Creek Reserve Master Plan concept design, and it also presents the council prepared design which incorporates the community feedback for consideration, endorsement and adoption. So by way of background and to jog some memories, including mine, the July 2020 settlement agreement between Council and the State of Victoria requires the NELP to work with Council to develop a Coonung Creek Reserve Master Plan, with the plan to guide the reinstatement once the North East Link is constructed. The NELP will occupy about 65% of the reserve for construction purposes, starting sometime in mid-28 and ending sometime in 2028. Starting sometime in mid-2024, ending sometime in 2028. They will formally acquire at some point in time 25% of the reserve to accommodate their permanent road-related infrastructure. According to the environmental performance requirements with which the project must comply, public land used by the project must be returned to its pre-construction condition unless agreed by the land manager. And to be absolutely clear, council owns and manages the reserve. So for the Coonung Creek Reserve Master Plan, NELP began developing it in mid-2022. Council officers shared feedback we'd gathered from community consultation in May 2022. And we also shared a lot of information and local knowledge that council officers had with the North East Link program. The North East Link's draft concept design, which is attachment 1 to the report, featured elements council officers generally supported, including a new playground at the western end of the reserve, a new public toilet, which is something the community's been asking for a long time, a relocation of the existing BMX and mountain bike skills track, and just generally improving the amenity and community facilities in the reserve. NELP also included 2 design elements not supported by council, being the Coonung Creek Trail reinstatement as a shared use path instead of mode-separated paths, and a significant square meterage of stormwater management infrastructure. So in September and October, we conducted 3.5 weeks of community consultation. It was over some school holidays, so it was a slightly longer than usual period. Our online survey received over 150 responses, and over 30 interested community members attended some in-person sessions. We're not in COVID anymore. The results of the engagement demonstrated the community and council are in agreement about how we want the reserve to look and feel post North East Link construction. And this agreement is shown in the council prepared Coonung Creek Reserve Master Plan design, which is attachment 3 to the report. In January 2024, North East Link program provided council a letter from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation about the Coonung Creek Reserve and the design. The letter noted the corporation's support for the reimagining of the Coonung Creek and disappointment at council's rejection of the reimagining of Coonung Creek. It's considered there are opportunities in the reserve to introduce initiatives to recognise the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and the Aboriginal histories and culture of the area. Reimagining the Coonung Creek does not need to be as literal as NELP has proposed, especially as the creek's original alignment is actually mostly under the Eastern Freeway. The financial implications of this report are not clear. NELP's left us in a bit of a financial grey zone because their guiding documents, the environmental performance requirements, and the urban design and landscape plans contradict each other. NELP must develop the project in accordance with both documents. To be absolutely clear, NELP is still financially responsible for the reinstatement of land they use for project purposes but do not need for permanent road infrastructure. This includes the reserve. Thank you, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms Davies. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding the motion. So seeking a point of clarity, and I'm not sure whether this is the appropriate time to ask this question. It doesn't pertain to the officer's report just given.
Sorry, I'll just seek some advice on that. So your question's not to do with the report, it's to do with...
I'm seeking some clarity on point 5F of the motion.
Right, okay. Well, it is part of the officer recommendation, so yes, that's accepted by governance, so please ask your question.
In relation to point 5F, which says that we will advise members of the resolution being members of Victorian federal parliaments with seats representing Boroondara, does that capture or does that capture our upper house members, or is that lower house? Because it doesn't, it's not clear to me.
Sorry, apologies, Councillor Watson, through you, Mayor. It does include both upper and lower house members in Victoria and the 2 federal MPs that represent Boroondara.
Thank you for that. And I'm happy to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Galt, do you have a question?
Thank you very much. For land that is required for road purposes, from memory, that was 25% of the land of Coonang Creek. Does council get any compensation for that whatsoever?
Through you, Mayor, yes, there will be, under current legislation, an opportunity for council to request compensation for any land permanently needed and acquired for the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms Davies, you're losing your voice. Would you like an officer to answer questions on your behalf? Or all right. So, Councillor Biggar, you've got your light on.
I do, thank you. I just had a question about point 4. Given that, of your recommendation, given that it seemed from the report anyway, that the reason for point 4 was because it had to do with the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people having a view on this, it just seemed that it would be appropriate to include reference to that in point 4. Otherwise, it just feels that it's not connected to what I took as the reason within the report, unless I misunderstood the report.
Through you, Madam Mayor, perhaps if I can suggest an amendment to point 4 might be to add the words at the end, in consultation with the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation.
Thank you. I would be happy with that.
Thank you. Now, I see no lights on, so councillors, if there are no further questions, Councillor Watson, you foreshadowed a motion. Your light is on? Yes, thank you.
Yes. I was going to say the officer's recommendation, but now that that amendment's been made, I just seek officer advice because we consult with a lot of parties and a lot of the community on coming up with a design, and we've singled out one group. So the way that motion's written, I don't think it reflects the consultation that we've done. So I seek officer advice to clarify whether that amendment reflects what we've actually done.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Mr Freer, would you like to respond to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the consultation that's been undertaken to date has been on the basis of what the community would like to see as part of the Coonang Creek Reserve Master Plan, and the feedback that's been provided has formed what is Attachment 3, which is being sought to be adopted here tonight. The approach that North East Link has provided is something different, and as Ms Davey mentioned earlier in the introduction, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation provided a letter to Council endorsing the position that North East Link had provided for in their master plan for this reserve, reflecting a waterway through the reserve, which we understand to be around stormwater management. Our view is that that is not an appropriate use in the reserve, and if there is concern or requirement, I guess, to reference the cultural heritage of this area, we think that there are other and better ways to do that. So the amendment to Part 4 is to develop other ways of doing that in consultation with the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation.
Thank you for the explanation, but I guess I'm still not achieving the clarity that I would hope, because the way it reads, it looks like that we've come up with, there's been a concept that's been suggested by one particular group of people and a design, and the way it reads, it looks like we've cut out the rest of our community. So I guess what I'm seeking is a way to express that shows that we have indeed consulted widely on the design, because I believe we have, or if that is not the case, then we leave ourselves open to an enormous amount of criticism for only consulting one group.
Mr Storer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I might just make the observation, we really felt that point number one recognise that there has been broad community input, and we're wanting to thank the community, and we will do that for the contribution they've made. Point 4 is there, as Mr Frere has mentioned, to achieve a very specific purpose, which is to highlight a concern, pardon me, a concern we have with regard to part of the plan. What we're trying to do here is to recognise that it's important to acknowledge the Indigenous heritage on the site, but not in the way that is being proposed by North East Link. We think it's important to call that out because, to put the argument differently, we have lost a very substantial amount of usable public open space on this site. Having a fair chunk of it given back to us as an ephemeral creek, which is not usable as public open space, in a municipality like Birrendara, where you cannot easily replace that land, is something about which we have very strong concerns. So there are two issues going on. Point number one acknowledges the community's contribution. Point number 4 acknowledges the concern that we want to deliver a better outcome for the community, while at the same time showing respect for the Indigenous past.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Thompson.
I'm happy to second that. I was just going to ask the CEO whether, based on what you've just indicated, whether clause 4 should actually have the word cultural design in it.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. We could replace the word holistic even with cultural.
That just makes it.
Madam Mayor, with your indulgence, I've noticed that there's Councillor Park being the Bellevue Ward councillor.
Has his light on.
Yeah, so I'd like to withdraw my moving of that motion and defer
I'm
to...
happy to just second the motion, but it is ordinary that the ward councillor would have something to say.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Look, I'm sorry, I was just going through the sequence of who had their lights on. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, just with that, I'm happy not to second. I'm happy to defer over to the ward councillor to second that if he's comfortable with that.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Park?
What I understood Councillor Watson was moving was the officer's recommendation.
As amended.
Oh, with that, then no, I'm not. So.
I'm happy to second it then.
All right, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillors, is there anyone in opposition to the motion before us? I see 2 in opposition. Sorry, Councillor Park, would you like to speak to the opposition? Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson, as the mover of the motion, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think that I'll speak to the motion in closing remarks and defer to the ward councillor.
Thank you. Would anyone like to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson, a second. Would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
No, I'm happy to speak. I think this motion purely clarifies what the original intent was. It just does it in a few extra words, makes it quite clear with regards to clause 4. It doesn't change in any way the outcome of what the officers of recommendation want. It just puts it in clearer language. I'm happy to support it on that basis.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak in opposition? Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only opposition to this is, as has been previously mentioned, is the inclusion of one particular community group, and I would hope that the clause 4 would not be misconstrued that they are the only community group, therefore, to be consulted. I'm uncomfortable on the basis that the ward councillor is uncomfortable with the motion before us.
Thank you. I see no further lights on. And Councillor Watson, we'll go for those in support. No, sorry. Sorry, I just saw your light go on and off. So Councillor Watson, you do want to speak?
Thank you. I'll do so briefly. I commend the officers with the outstanding work that they've done and for the hard yards they put in to advocate for our community to get the best results from this state government. We've still got a long road to hoe, and so this is one of many steps. And my question on clarity was to make sure that when we write to our elected representatives that we write to all of them, because we need to make sure that there are many, many eyes on this project, and so that we can continue to advocate and get the best result possible for our community. I understand the ward councillor's concerns about calling out one particular group, and have to admit that my concerns align with his, and I expressed that during question time, but reasonably comfortable with the motion as printed on the screen, and look forward to officers continuing that important work of advocacy to get a better result for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And councillors, will put the motion to the vote. Those in support? Thank you. Those opposed? Thank you. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, officers. We will just wait for the CEO to leave the room. All right, councillors, the next item is terms of reference for the CEO Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee, and we have Mary Ann Palasides, the Executive Manager of People, Culture and Development, to present that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors. This report seeks council endorsement of the terms of reference for the CEO Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee. The Local Government Act 2020 requires councils to develop, adopt and keep in force a CEO employment and remuneration policy. Council adopted its first policy on the 13th of December 2021. The policy required the establishment of a CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee to consider and make recommendations to Council on CEO employment-related matters. Until recently, this committee operated as a delegated committee. At the Council meeting on the 18th of December 2023, Council adopted an amended CEO Employment and Remuneration Policy, which is attachment 2 of your report. A key change to the policy was for the committee to become an advisory committee rather than a delegated committee. In doing so, Council revoked the associated instrument of delegation for that committee. As the committee is now an advisory committee, it requires terms of reference. Officers developed a draft terms of reference for the committee, largely based on terms of reference used across other advisory committees, the governance rules and recommendations arising from the Sandon report, and has also incorporated councillor feedback. So the draft terms of reference are now presented to councillors for endorsement. And through you, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you, Ms Palasides. I don't see any lights on for questions. So, councillors, I'm in search of someone to put the motion. Councillor Addis.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation up on the screen.
Thank you. Now, sorry, I've just seen some lights now come on. Councillor Addis, before we go to a seconder, can I just ask Councillor Sinfield, did you have a question?
No, I was prepared to second the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. All right, so I see no other lights on. So, councillors, is there anyone in opposition to that? No. Councillor Addis, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I'll need to put my light on. Thank you. This is an important role for council, and I want to thank the officers for all the work that has gone into preparing this, and equally all the work council, my colleagues on council have equally put into making sure that this is the best document that we think we can get for this, to guide us in this important decision-making action of council.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Now, there's no opposition. Councillor Sinfield, not happy to let the motion be put. So I ask councillors to show their hands in support. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, the next item is with regard to CEO Employment Remuneration Advisory Committee Independent Advisors. Now, councillors, I seek a motion to go into confidential business on this matter. Councillor Addis.
I'm happy to so move.
All right, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Now, councillors, because we are taking this into confidential business, I would now like to close the meeting to the public. The reason for closing to the public is to discuss matters that are of personal information which, if released, could result in unreasonable disclosure of information of people.
We should probably vote on that before going into confidential.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just reading why we were proposing to go into confidential first. Councillors, do I have a mover? Councillor Addis has moved. Seconded was Councillor Sinfield. Councillors, I seek a motion now to go into confidential business. Got the motion there. Sorry. The council resolves to... Bear with me. Excuse me for a minute. I just put the motion to the vote. Thank you.
Which
Those in
motion?
favour- Sorry, Councillor Stavrou. All right. Can I see a show of hands to go into confidential? Thank you. Unanimous, so moved. Thank you. Thank you. Now we're just going to call the CEO back and then we'll resume the meeting. Time for a cup of tea? Yeah. Good. We're right to go? Thank you. Now we will reopen the meeting to the public. Can I please have a motion to reopen the meeting? Which we've already done, so that's, sorry, bear with. Thank you. To members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, welcome back to the live streaming of the council meeting. We will now move to general business. Thank you. Those that declared a conflict for leave of absence, Councillor Park, Thompson and Sinfield, would you like to leave the gallery? Thank you. Thank you. Councillors, I am in search of a mover for the following motion as appears on the screen behind me. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Biggar?
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. And seconder? Councillor Gillies?
So second, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone in opposition? I will put that motion to the vote. Those in favour? I declare that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We will bring our colleagues back into the room. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, are there any matters of general business that anyone wishes to raise? I see no lights on. Any matters of urgent business? I see no lights on. Confidential business? We have 2 items to be raised in confidential business, so I will now asked to close the meeting. Can I please have a councillor put forward a motion to close the meeting to the public in accordance with section 66 2A and subsection 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020 to discuss items listed. Councillor Thompson?
I'm happy to do so, and the motion is on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. A seconder, Councillor Watson?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Anyone in opposition? I'll put that motion to the vote. Those in favour? That is supported unanimously. Thank you. We will now close the meeting to the public. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. To members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, welcome back to the live streaming of the council meeting. We have now reached the stage of the close of the meeting, and as it brings us to the end of our order of proceedings. I thank all of you that have joined us in the gallery and those who have watched online, and I now declare the council meeting closed at 9:07 p.m. Thank you and good evening.